Everyone thought my husband would win that day. Even I thought so for a moment as I sat quietly in that cold courtroom watching him walk in with his shoulders straight, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his lawyer smiling with confidence as if the outcome was already decided. He did not even look at me, not once, because in his mind, I was already defeated, already erased, already a woman about to lose everything. He stood there believing I was weak, believing I was foolish, believing that love had made me blind, but what he never understood was that silence does not mean ignorance and patience does not mean surrender. My name is Laura Bennett, and the day my husband said I will take everything from you in court was the day his nightmare quietly began. Our marriage did not collapse overnight. It rotted slowly from the inside with late nights, unexplained trips, sudden coldness, and the way he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an obstacle. He cheated openly, carelessly, believing I would never dare to challenge him because he controlled the money, the house, the connections. He told his friends I would leave with nothing. He told his mistress I was too soft to fight back, and when the divorce papers came, he made sure they were brutal, demanding full custody, full assets, and even accusing me of emotional instability. But what he never noticed was that while he was busy underestimating me, I was observing, listening, collecting proof, every message, every receipt, every hidden account, every lie documented with calm precision. I did not cry in front of him. I did not argue. I did not threaten. I let him feel powerful because powerful men make careless mistakes, and he made many when we entered the courtroom. He looked at me for the first time with a smirk, leaning toward his lawyer, whispering loudly enough for me to hear, "She has nothing." I could feel the eyes of strangers judging me, the quiet woman with no expensive clothes, no dramatic lawyer, no visible strength. But strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it arrives with evidence so solid it cannot be ignored. As the judge asked us to stand, my husband spoke confidently, painting himself as the victim, the provider, the man burdened by an ungrateful wife. He claimed I contributed nothing, that I depended entirely on him, that I was incapable of independence. His lawyer echoed every word, reinforcing the image of a helpless woman sitting silently at the defense table. And when it was my turn, I stood slowly, my hands steady, my voice calm, and I said very little because my lawyer did the talking and the documents did the screaming. The first file revealed his hidden income accounts, opened under shell companies. The second exposed years of tax evasion. The third detailed hotel bookings, gifts, transfers, and messages to multiple women, including the one sitting nervously in the back row as the courtroom atmosphere shifted. His confident posture cracked. His lawyer flipped pages too fast. His smirk vanished, replaced by confusion, then fear. The judge leaned forward, asking questions my husband could not answer. His voice stuttered for the first time in our entire marriage, and I watched him realize that control had slipped from his hands. The man who walked in expecting to take everything had forgotten one thing. I was never powerless. I was patient, and patience, when combined with truth, is devastating. The judge ordered a recess, and as we stood, my husband finally looked at me, not with arrogance, but with disbelief, whispering, "What did you do?" And I met his eyes and replied quietly, "I told you nothing because you never asked." And in that moment, I knew the divorce he thought would destroy me was about to become the story that destroyed him. When the court resumed, my husband returned to his seat, visibly shaken, no longer the man who believed victory was guaranteed. His lawyer whispered urgently, flipping through documents, trying to regain control, but control once lost is rarely recovered. The judge began questioning him directly about the offshore accounts, the unreported income, the luxury purchases hidden under business expenses, and each question tightened the noose around his confidence. He tried to deny at first, then deflect, then blame his accountant, his business partners, even me, but lies collapse. When confronted with timelines, bank trails, and digital footprints, I watched him unravel in silence, remembering every night I lay awake pretending to sleep while he texted other women, every time he dismissed my questions with laughter or anger, believing fear would keep me Obedient, the judge asked how a man claiming financial hardship could afford private vacations, gifts, jewelry, and secret apartments, and the courtroom fell so quiet you could hear the air itself holding its breath. His mistress stood up suddenly and left, unable to face the evidence projected on the screen messages. Written in his own words, promises of divorce, promises of wealth, promises that were now dissolving in public view, my lawyer presented. Further proof recordings where he threatened to leave me, penniless emails where he bragged about hiding assets, texts where he mocked my silence, calling me weak and broken. The judge did not interrupt because truth, when laid bare, needs no commentary. My husband tried to speak again, but his voice cracked, his words tangled, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw him powerless, stripped of charm money and intimidation. The image he built so carefully shattered in front of strangers who now saw him not as a successful man, but as a liar and manipulator. The judge ordered an immediate audit, froze multiple accounts, and postponed custody decisions, pending investigation, and with every ruling my husband's face drained of color. The man who said he would take everything was now fighting to keep anything at all. During the break, he approached me, desperation replacing arrogance, asking why I did this, how long I planned this, and I answered honestly, I planned nothing. I simply paid attention, and when court resumed, my lawyer delivered the final blow, revealing evidence of forged signatures, illegal transfers, and coercion that escalated the case beyond divorce into criminal territory. The judge removed his lawyer from the case, citing conflict of interest, and referred the matter to financial crimes division. Gasps filled the courtroom as realization finally struck him. This was no longer a divorce, this was exposure. And I sat quietly, knowing that everything he tried to take from me was now being taken from him, not by revenge, but by consequence. And as he was escorted back to his seat, shaking, I felt no joy, only clarity, because justice does not scream, it arrives calmly, carrying receipts. By the third day of hearings, the courtroom no longer felt like neutral ground. It felt like a mirror reflecting every lie my husband had lived by for years. He entered slower now, shoulders bent, eyes avoiding everyone, especially me, because I was no longer the quiet wife in the corner. I was the woman whose silence had dismantled his empire. The judge began by reviewing the audit results. It revealed numbers so damning, even the clerk paused while reading them. Millions unaccounted for. Years of manipulation, false reporting, and deliberate concealment. My husband tried to interrupt, claiming misunderstandings, clerical errors, exaggerations, but the judge raised a hand, stopping him with a look that carried finality and authority. And in that moment, I understood how fragile arrogance truly is. When faced with structure and law, witnesses were called, former employees, business partners, even his own cousin, who admitted under oath that he helped move money between accounts at my husband's request in exchange for promises that now meant nothing. Each testimony peeled away another layer of the image my husband had carefully constructed, and with every word spoken, my memories replayed nights of loneliness, mornings of pretending, smiles, forced conversations where I doubted my own instincts because he told me. I was imagining things. Gaslighting is a slow poison. It makes you question reality until evidence brings clarity. The judge reviewed recordings of my husband threatening to ruin me financially if I ever spoke, messages where he laughed about controlling the narrative, and even voice notes where he bragged about how courts always side with men like him. Those recordings echoed through the courtroom, and I watched strangers shake their heads as his voice betrayed him. The confidence, once attractive, now sounded cruel, childish, desperate. My husband finally turned toward me during a recess, his eyes red, his hands trembling, asking if I felt satisfied, if this was enough, and I looked at him calmly and said, "This is not satisfaction. This is accountability, something you never learned." And when I said those words, I felt the final emotional chain break, because I was no longer seeking validation from the man who once defined my worth. The custody evaluation followed, revealing how little time he spent with our child, how often he canceled visits, how frequently nannies replaced presents, how birthdays were missed, school meetings ignored, promises broken. The judge noted patterns of neglect, emotional absence, and prioritization of self-interest over parental responsibility. And with that, the foundation of his custody claim collapsed completely. My lawyer presented character witnesses, friends, neighbors, teachers, doctors who spoke of my consistency, stability, and involvement. Contrasting sharply with the image my husband tried to sell the courtroom, no longer questioned who the reliable parent was. It was obvious the judge ruled provisional full custody to me pending final judgment, and when those words were spoken, something shifted inside me. Not triumph, but release, because the fear that haunted my nights finally loosened its grip. My husband sat frozen, staring at the table as if the wood might open and swallow him, the man who once controlled every decision. Now powerless to influence even a moment, the judge continued outlining conditions: mandatory financial disclosure, restricted contact, supervised visitation, and cooperation with investigators, each sentence removing another illusion of control. He once believed untouchable. As proceedings closed for the day, the judge warned him that further dishonesty would result in immediate penalties, including contempt charges and possible arrest. And for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes, not fear of losing money or status, but fear of consequences, something he had avoided his entire life. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered, flashing cameras, asking questions about betrayal, about justice, about how a woman turned the tables, but I said nothing because my story did not need dramatization. The truth was already louder than any headline, and that night, as I sat alone reviewing documents one last time, listening to the quiet of a home no longer filled with tension, I realized something profound. Revenge is loud. Justice is quiet, and survival is the strongest statement of all, and the nightmare he created for me had finally found its way back to him the days following. The third hearing felt heavier than any courtroom moment because consequences do not arrive all at once. They unfold slowly, relentlessly, and publicly. My husband, who once commanded rooms, now waited in hallways, answering calls from investigators, auditors, and lawyers who no longer spoke with confidence but with caution. Every asset he once flaunted became a question, every signature a liability, every decision a potential crime. And while he spiraled, I focused on rebuilding a life that had been paused for years. The court-appointed forensic team uncovered deeper layers of deception: businesses registered under false names, properties hidden through relatives, luxury items listed as operational expenses. The judge expanded the investigation, and with that expansion came media attention, not the dramatic kind my husband once enjoyed, but the unforgiving kind that dissects facts. Headlines no longer praised his success. They questioned its origin. Former associates distanced themselves. Sponsors withdrew contracts, and invitations disappeared overnight. The man who believed influence was permanent learned how temporary it truly is. When built on lies, he attempted to negotiate privately, asking for settlements, forgiveness, silence. But the court denied all backdoor attempts, reminding him that accountability is not negotiable. The custody supervisors submitted reports noting his emotional instability, sudden outbursts, and inability to accept responsibility, reinforcing the court's earlier decision to limit access to our child. I watched this from a distance, not with pleasure, but with clarity, because detachment is what healing looks like when fear no longer controls you. Friends asked how I remained calm, how I slept, how I smiled, and I told them the truth. Peace arrives when you stop fighting reality and start standing in it. The fourth hearing opened with criminal referrals. Officially acknowledged, the judge detailed violations: tax fraud, intimidation, obstruction, and false declarations, each count carrying weight beyond divorce. My husband stood again, but this time without arrogance, without posture, without illusion. He looked smaller. Not physically, but internally, like a man finally seeing the walls he built. Closing in, the court addressed me, asking about impact: emotional, psychological, financial, and for the first time, I spoke at length, not with anger, not with tears, but with facts. I described years of manipulation, isolation, financial control, threats, masked as jokes, and how silence was mistaken for weakness when it was survival. The courtroom listened, because truth spoken without drama carries undeniable power. The judge acknowledged harm, recognized resilience, and reaffirmed full custody long term support and restitution plans. Assets once hidden were reassigned trusts, dissolved accounts seized, and the narrative my husband believed he owned was rewritten by evidence. As the session ended, he tried to look at me again, but I did not meet his eyes, not out of spite, but because closure does not require acknowledgement from the person who caused the pain. And as I walked out, I understood something important. The nightmare was no longer unfolding for me. It was firmly his, and it had only just begun. What followed after the fourth hearing was not chaos, but collapse, the quiet, irreversible kind that does not announce itself with explosions, but with doors closing one by one. My husband attempted damage control, issuing statements through public relations firms claiming misunderstandings, exaggerations, personal vendettas, but facts do not bend to spin. In every document, every testimony, every verified transaction erased another layer of his credibility. Banks initiated internal reviews, freezing lines of credit. Partners invoked exit clauses, dissolving ventures that once defined his identity. The businesses he used to intimidate me became liabilities, dragging him deeper into scrutiny. And while his world narrowed, mine expanded slowly, carefully. Intentionally, the court finalized protective orders, ensuring distance, safety, and stability. And for the first time in years, I breathed without measuring my words or monitoring his moods. The supervised visits revealed more than any accusation ever could. His inability to engage, his impatience, his resentment toward boundaries. The reports were clinical, unemotional, devastating, because neutrality often tells the harshest truth. The judge reviewed them without commentary and simply nodded as if the outcome had been clear all along. Restitution calculations were finalized, properties liquidated, trusts reassigned, and accounts redistributed, not as punishment but correction. The law does not seek revenge, it seeks balance, and that balance restored what manipulation had stolen. My husband stood silently as rulings were read, each one severing another tie to the life he believed untouchable. He attempted one last appeal, not legal, but emotional, sending messages through intermediaries, asking to speak, to explain, to rewrite history. But I declined, not because I hated him, but because closure does not come from conversations with those who refuse responsibility. The final session ended without drama, no raised voices, no theatrics, only the sound of a gavel confirming what evidence had already proven. And as we exited the courtroom separately, I did not look back. Not because I feared him, but because my future no longer included his shadow. The nightmare he promised me in court had reversed itself entirely, not through schemes or revenge, but through patience, truth, and the quiet power of preparation. And as I stepped into the sunlight that day, I understood something deeply liberating. Strength is not loud, justice is not rushed, and when you stop trying to survive someone else, you finally begin to live yourself. The final judgment arrived not as a shock, but as a quiet confirmation of everything I had survived and protected for years. The courtroom felt different that morning, calmer, heavier, as if even the walls understood this was an ending that could not be undone. The judge entered, reviewed the record, and spoke with a steadiness that left no room for doubt. Custody permanent and exclusive. To me, financial restitution finalized, all hidden assets seized, reassigned, or liquidated. Long-term support secured, legal consequences affirmed, not as punishment, but as consequence. And with every sentence spoken, the man who once promised to destroy me diminished further, until he was no longer the center of the story, but a footnote in my survival. My husband stood silently. No interruptions, no confidence, no defiance. Just a man facing the total weight of his own actions. The judge addressed him directly, stating that power built on deception always collapses under truth, and that intimidation does not survive documentation. Those words did not feel victorious. They felt corrective, as if balance itself had finally been restored. I did not look at him when the gavel struck. I looked forward because my life no longer needed to orbit his existence outside the courthouse. The world continued as normal cars passed. People talked, phones rang, and I realized something profound. While his world had ended, mine was only beginning. The months that followed were not dramatic, they were disciplined. Healing is not a celebration, it is repetition, safety, routine, honesty, mornings without fear, evenings without walking on emotional glass, nights without rehearsing arguments in my head. My home transformed into a place of peace. My child thrived, laughter returned naturally, not forced, not performative, but real. Therapy replaced survival mode, growth replaced anxiety, confidence replaced doubt, and slowly the woman I had buried beneath patience and fear stood upright again. My ex-husband faced ongoing investigations, penalties, loss of status, reputation, connections. Everything he believed made him untouchable. Stripped away quietly, completely. He attempted one final reach, a letter, apology, explanations, regret. But regret without accountability is manipulation in softer clothing, and I returned it unopened, not because I was angry, but because I was finished. Years passed, and my name faded from headlines. But strengthened in reality, I rebuilt financially, emotionally, spiritually. I learned that silence is not weakness, patience is not surrender, and preparation is power. The day my husband said, "I will take everything from you," he believed fear would erase me, but fear sharpened me. His confidence became his blindness. His threats became evidence, and the court he trusted to crush me became the place where truth finally stood taller than intimidation. He walked into court certain of victory, certain I would leave broken, invisible, erased. He walked out with nothing, no control, no custody, no credibility, no power. And I walked out with everything that mattered: my child, my peace, my dignity, my future, and myself.